Jana Urban Space and Studio Pod. Um, Hi, Shank. I think
Hi.
Debanil is here as well. Debanil, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on. Thank you,
Okay.
Soumya.
Yeah. So the way we are going to go about this session is that I'm going to take you guys through a bit of an introduction to the project we're doing here, which is Walkable Malleswaram, uh, followed by Shashank's session, which is Jana Urban Space, and then Studio Pod session. So these will be 15 to 20-minute presentations, which then will move into a breakout session, basically, that we will just have questions from the audience and more of a discussion oriented thing, as well as sort of trying to see how some of the architects who are part of the design workshop also see the correlation between what we're doing in Malleswaram and the projects that you guys have been doing, and sort of taking the discussion in that direction. So I'm going to start with the presentation right now. So as you guys know, we've had, these are a session of 4 tracks. A lot of you guys, of course, may be wondering, why are we doing these sessions? Why all of a sudden Walkable Neighbourhoods? This is part of a project that we're doing in Malleswaram called Walkable Malleswaram. It is a citizen-driven project that has been funded by DULT as one of the neighborhoods that has been funded by DULT, which is a Directorate of Urban Land Transport. It's a government body here that is actually launched something called SUMA, which is Sustainable Urban Mobility Accords. The reason Malleswaram Social, that's the organization that is here, as well the citizen organization, and Sensing Local Foundation, which is the organization I represent, we came together to set up Malleswaram Urban Living Lab. And this was a pitch that we submitted for the SUMA competition, and this sort of was one of the neighborhoods that got selected out of 20 to do this. The project is meant to be a year-long project, and we are currently in our 3rd month of the project. We started off with just building more support for the project as citizens and more people came on board. And now we are moving into our design phase. One of the pieces before we hit design was to reach out and get inspired. Also to understand what else are people doing across the country when it comes to the scale of the street, and sort of trying to learn from each other, as well as open out some really tough discussions of how to intervene when it comes to public space. So we opened with Decoding Malleswaram's Conservancies. This was an amazing session where we had Suchitra from Malleswaram Social and Srilata, who was one of the residents of the Conservancy lanes in Malleswaram, to actually get down to explaining what is the planning of these conservancies, why Malleswaram, why walking, and actually get into the tougher questions of saying, what were these conservancies there as before? Why are they neglected? How can we start looking at them? And almost like, how have people in a very informal manner already started reclaiming these spaces in a positive manner and negative manner, actually, to add to that. The second track which we had was yesterday, which was on planning for public spaces. For this track, we had 2 really amazing people. One was Brinda Shastri and the other Melissa Smith. Brinda Shastri is a well-known urban planner, designer, who's also leading the urban design, sort of Masters of Urban Design at RV College, those of you that are familiar with it. And Melissa leads the same department at CEPT in Ahmedabad. And both of them spoke about, one is Brinda spoke about the Gandhi Bazaar project in Bangalore and how they have actually approached it, and it's in the process of moving into the implementation phase. And Melissa spoke about a project on reclaiming vacant lands and how to start negotiating space when it comes to vacant land, and just understanding how people have already adapted that space and then moving from there rather than thinking of it as a blank canvas. Today we'll have designing streets for people, and I think this is a very exciting session for multiple reasons. One is all of us in Bangalore are seeing Tendashore roads expand. So I think for Jana Urban Space, the reason we got them on board also specifically is because when we did a walking audit in Malleswaram, there was a stark difference between the Tendashore footpaths and the rest of the footpaths, which are coming up in Malleswaram, and this was pointed out by all of them, all the residents who did the walking audit. So we really wanted to understand further about what came about, how did Tendershore actually come about, what are the design principles that Tendershore roads actually follow that we see or may even be taking for granted for that matter. The second presentation is by Studio Pod. Studio Pod has been, I think, more popular amongst a lot of young architects. We've all sort of looked up to them in the way they have approached urban design in the public space realm. It has been very interesting to have conversations and see a lot of interesting projects that they have been doing in Mumbai. And I think really bringing about what is that in Mumbai happening at the street scale, as well as for us to start understanding that is it the same or is it different? Are the challenges the same or are the challenges different that we deal with when it comes to the scale of the street and designing for the street scale? The final session that we will be having tomorrow is on tactical urbanism. It's a new, not a new word in the sense globally, but it's a new word that has been, that is getting used extensively in India right now on saying, let's pilot, let's see, let's try, let's attract people, and then let's make it permanent. And I think that's a very healthy discussion to start having on what is tactical urbanism. And so our final session will focus on that tomorrow. Just to get in very quickly into the Malleswaram project, the Malleswaram project has come out of, like I said, a lot of what the citizens have already done over the last 4 years. It is not, looking at walkability in Malleswaram is nothing new, but it's just that Malleswaram being one of the sort of few planned neighborhoods that we have, and interestingly, it is a 15-minute neighborhood, which globally cities are thriving to get. And we have that right here in Bangalore in one of our neighborhoods. Yet, we still need to pull out our private vehicles to traverse through this neighborhood. Only reason being that it is barely walkable. So I think that became a touch point for all residents as well, who started pulling out multiple issues across here. And this happened when we started making the proposal, where we tried to capture from citizens, okay, what exactly is going on here and how are people actually sort of traversing. And we realized majority of the people do walk for their neighborhood trips and recreational trips. Yet you see that there is a demography that's also above 45 years old, and a lot of them are more elderly citizens as well. So trying to understand their challenge, trying to understand what is going on here, trying to understand how people actually associate the streets, right? So this is an angst map that was done by one of the residents as well, where it was about just feeling unsafe, having accidents, pedestrian accident and crashes across almost every other location, having like really high footpaths. So from there, we sort of went into doing a mapping with residents to understand where does this occur. As we moved in also, what we realized is Malleswaram had a huge potential with the Tendershore roads that are meant to come and the Conservancy lanes that exist. So you'll see these bottom two images are that of the Conservancy lanes. We then went in to coin a vision for Malleswaram, where the intent was to create well-designed slowways, leveraging the existing Conservancy lanes. And what you see in red are Conservancy lanes, which can be dedicated to prioritize the movement of pedestrian and cyclists within this 15-minute neighborhood. So effectively, we were looking at 11 kilometers of road, out of which 3 kilometers was just Conservancy lanes. We have a live website. I urge you all to follow the project through that. We have made the project public so that more people can get involved. We have just culminated our walking audit and are collating this data together, where we had over 60 plus citizens, designers, architects, students come and map the footpaths and the conservancies across the network. The project partners government partners are DULT, BBMP. Our community partners are Malleswaram Social and Malleswaram Swabhimana Initiative. Malleswaram Urban Living Lab and Sensing Local are the technical partners, and Bengaluru Moving Vilac are the campaign partners. I'll stop here. And Nishita and Naveen from my team will also be sharing the link to the workshop and the website, which you guys can also follow and sign up if you would like to. From here, I would like to welcome Shashank from Jana USP. If Shashank, do you have a presentation you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead and start off on that. I must say, what you guys are doing in Sofia is quite fascinating. Malleswaram itself as a neighborhood is, chock full of a lot of interesting, especially the conservancy lanes and all of that. And getting public participation, getting people involved is one of the big challenges that we do face here. Owing to lack of time, owing to a lot of reasons, it's very difficult to usually get people involved. But fascinating to see that so many.
I think that's the unique opportunity with the SUMA program, that it's giving you 1 year to exactly do that. Where you have the luxury to test, you have the luxury to include people in as well.
Yes, so, that luxury is something that we definitely envy here. We very rarely get afforded that.
Yeah.
Anyway, just let me know. I should be able to see my screen now. Is that possible?
It's coming on. Yes, we can see it. Maybe if you can just make it full screen.
Sure thing. Okay. So as Sobia was mentioning, so we at Jana Urban Space have been working on streets and street design for a while now. We had pioneered Tendershore, in case you all have heard of it, and it's kind of been a very work in progress kind of a thing, because it was a lot of testing that we did across the city, and then use the things that we learned from Tendershore and all the trial and error that we did. We worked out the kinks right in the beginning with the phase 1 of Tendershore, and then after that move forward. So let me introduce a little bit about us. So we at Jana, we basically have 3 studios over here. We have an architecture and design, the urban design, and the urban planning studio. And underlying and feeding into all of that is our urban policy studio. With the architecture and design, we focus primarily on affordable housing. The urban design is streetscapes, any sort of public space design really. And the urban planning studio is obviously planning projects across the country. So we're part of the larger group called Jana Group, and this includes everything from Jana Small Finance Bank, Jana, which is kind of slightly more well known, I think, than the others. There's also Jana Graha, which is obviously very well known. They do a lot of citizen kind of activism and participatory democracy. That's primarily what they look into. Jana Dar builds affordable housing for people in Bangalore and around the country as well. And Jana Urban Space, that's us, and we primarily look at the spatial dimensions of fixing cities. So Tendershore is something that it started off being like specifications for urban road execution. That is technically what Tendershore stands for, but really it's basically about designing streets for people. And that's primarily what drives us here at Jana. We had put out the first set of guidelines. It was actually the first set of street design guidelines for urban roads in India back in 2011. And this was something that, it kind of transcended the political landscape, because it was initially authored by Swati Ramanathan, who you all might be familiar with. And it was launched by the then CM, the then Chief Minister, Mr. Sadanand Gowda. And it was then carried forward by the subsequent Chief Minister, who was Chief Minister Siddaramaiah. So there wasn't any political agenda behind it. It kind of really went forward with across the political spectrum. So Tendershore itself, and what sets it apart, is that it looks at not just the at grade, which is what we call the surface level of your streets. It also looks at what's happening above it, what's happening below it. And that's really, I think, critically what Tendershore solved, which was very lacking in our cities back then. And we took a 6-pronged approach to the design of these streets. The first is to balance the ROW. That is, the ROW is basically a right of way from compound wall to compound wall. And we want an equitable distribution across that ROW. We do not want to have any sort of like right now, if you look at most streets, it is primarily your cars get dominance. We wanted to rethink that, and in that process, kind of give back spaces that we can to pedestrians, to cyclists, to other users of the road. The second thing is to have uniform travel lanes, because one thing that we see in Indian cities is that you have a suddenly widening travel lanes. It suddenly becomes 3 lanes, and then it becomes 2 lanes, and then it becomes one lane. Now that just doesn't work, because what you get is you get pinch points at multiple points in the road, and that basically funnels traffic into a specific point and causes a lot of traffic jams. So that is another big point, which is uniform travel lanes. The third is to promote non-motorized transport, that is your bicycling infrastructure and even sort of new mobility options that are coming about. And this is basically promoting any sort of sustainable mobility through the street design. The next is to organize the underground utilities, which is a big part of what made Tendershaw successful back in the day. Because right now it's very haphazard. There's no kind of clear definition of what lines goes where, and it's quite a mess under the road. In fact, if you dig down into any of our roads, you'll find a hodgepodge of utility lines, and even the agencies don't actually know necessarily where their lines are. So organizing that and fixing that was a big part and a key part of Tendershaw. The other one is, of course, to design safe intersections, because a maximum amount of your pedestrian crashes or even general user conflicts happen at intersections, because that's where you have multiple user groups trying to merge together and try and cross over each other. So designing safe intersections was a key part of Tendershaw. And then, of course, to be smart and sustainable, so integrating smart lighting, integrating smart dustbins, all of that, and smart street furniture in general is also part of it. So coming to how we've expanded across India, so we have about 50 plus kilometers of Tendershaw roads that are currently done in Bangalore, currently done and being done in Bangalore. We also have about 15 kilometers in Hubli. Nagpur has also adopted Tendershaw standards, and we are currently working with GCC in Chennai to also put out about 15 kilometers of Tendershaw roads or Tendershaw-like roads over there. So it's something that Bangalore is very much a home base, so to speak, but then we've also expanded into other cities in India. So coming to Bangalore specifically, Tendershaw roads are primarily limited to the ABD as of now, but it's something that we are expanding actively out into other places as well. So a big part of what we're very proud of over here is that we managed to do about 39 kilometers of cycling tracks that go along with these roads. Now, there have been a lot of learnings in the process of what works in terms of cycling tracks, whether we can provide it along with the footpath users, or do we have to segregate it? Do we put it at the road level, or do we put it at the footpath level? A lot of testing and trying has happened in the process, and we have now come to what works best. We have arrived at, and of course the key point of what we're discussing here is about walkability, and the pedestrian network is quite comprehensive. And in fact, we honestly do think that Bangalore is one of the most walkable city centers in the country. So I'll take you through a few perhaps before and after photos. So this was St. Mark's Road, perhaps around 2011 or so, and this is what it is now. So you can see that there is the priority over here is giving your adequate crossing, providing, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but basically providing bollards so that you prevent.
We can see it.
Okay. So you can prevent entry and exit of vehicles onto the footpath, because that was part of the whole learning process that we had. We found that just when you gave regular ramps leading up to the pavement, you ended up having parking on the footpaths. You ended up having vehicles like your two-wheelers using it for short bursts. So that's what led to the bollards that you see now. And in a way, the bollards have kind of become a part of the character and the fabric of Bangalore, I feel, because especially if you come around the city center, and even the new Tendershaw roads that we are not pioneering and that are being done by the BBMP, even those, they have that trademark bollards on them. And I think that's become almost like an identity of Bangalore. This is, of course, the broken footpaths. Bangalore was known for its bad roads, especially in and around the city center, which, we hope has been fixed now. So that's St. Mark's Road. This is one of the junctions. And a big part of what we try and do is to reclaim public spaces. So this is what the junction looked like prior to our intervention, and this is what we designed as the new intersection. And just by looking at desire lines, looking at the way traffic moves, understanding how pedestrians cross the roads, how the various user groups travel through the space, we are able to kind of condense the travel lanes to only the desired parts, and then give back the rest of the space to the city, and create successful public spaces in the process. So this is what that space junction looked like. Before, it was a nightmare for pedestrians and cyclists in general, and this is what it looks like now, which is a lot more like cleaner, neater, a better division of the right of way. This is a view from above of that same plaza. So it's not just visuals; it's also we've been able to execute this on ground. So that's something again that we're really happy with. So this is what Tendershore, the roads look like. Again, there's another example on Residency Road of what the road looked like. And you can see there's like people crossing randomly. There is no real division of right of way at all. It's a very inequitable street. And this is now post Tendershore. A big part of this is things like maintaining and retaining existing trees, having dedicated bus lanes, having dedicated parking spaces, and obviously the uniform travel lanes that I was telling you all about earlier. So all of that together is what really solves the problem. It can't be any one thing that takes focus over the others. And again, the bollards, as I was saying about creating a safe pedestrian experience using those bollards, providing NMT infrastructure like your cycle tracks, and this is something that we're experimenting. We have done in the initial Tendershore Road. We had done a lot of landscape strips. We are now trying to convert them to bioswales, which basically take in your rainwater and absorb it and let it percolate slowly into the ground. So bioswales is something that is again part of the whole learning and exploration process that we are currently working on. This is another example of reclaiming public space, where the cash pharmacy junction, which is a pretty critical junction here on Residency Road. So right at that junction, we realized that the actual path that the vehicles need to take does not need to be we don't actually need all of this land to be asphalted. So can we tighten that up and create a public space that is given back to the community? And in fact, over here, right next to where this public space that we've created is, you have a very large school. So actively we wanted to create something where people could use the space outside as your waiting areas, as your that's the school there, and we wanted to create like this plaza with waiting spaces for parents, drivers, whatever it may be. So that's what it currently looks like. Basically, taking away what used to be asphalted and giving it back to the pedestrians. So from an implementation standpoint, I'll just quickly run you through, what are some of the challenges that we face. So one big thing is we did not want to make the entire road and the entire ROW unusable during the time the Tendershore Road was being constructed. So we had initially done it in just segments of 100 meters at a time to try and minimize and to allow traffic flow to continue through the road. So that is a big challenge. That certainly was, because it required a lot of coordination with the traffic police and other agencies involved. So this is an example of what I was telling you in terms of the hotspots of underground utilities, that it just everything goes everywhere underground. Like they just lay it without kind of really thinking of the larger network. So fixing that was a big part of what we did, and this is a bit of an example of the cleaned up underground utility network with dedicated ducts and regular inspection chambers. That's another big thing that we've done. And of course, there's a lot of participatory process. This is not just Jana decides to do it and Jana does it. There is a lot of public consultation. There's a lot of agency involvement. A lot of people have to sign on, get on board, understand what we're trying to do, and be part of the process. It's very rewarding once it actually gets executed. So coming to some of the learnings, actually I had touched upon them, is things like we need those bollards. Even for instance, the paver blocks. The paver blocks is something that we initially did as loose fixed pavers because we wanted it to be removable whenever there needs to be any digging up of utility lines. But what we then noticed is that we didn't actually need loose fixed pavers because we had provided enough inspection chambers for the utility agencies to access. So we've now transitioned to perfectly fixed pavers, because otherwise what we're having is we're having this problem of rodents coming beneath the sand and creating channels, and when any of those channels collapse, it affected the pavers on top. So now we've moved the transition to fixed pavers, but as you may know, none of the tender show roads, almost none of the tender show roads have ever been dug up since we've converted them. Yeah, this is a bit of a before after of what the transformation can look like. Adding these landscape strips and bioswales is a key part of the whole process. So I'll leave it here, and perhaps Sobia, if you could play the video. This is Swati has basically a bit about Tendeshwar and kind of the initial inspiration and what drove it.
Yeah, Naveen will just play it.
So. Actually, I don't think it's audible.
Yeah, he's just checking.
Okay, sure. Would you like me to give it a try from here?
Sure, please do.
Can you just let me know if you can hear the audio?
Yeah.
The road is actually the conduit for all the other networks which impact my quality of life. That's the underground network which is supposed to collect all the rainwater and prevent flooding. That's the one which brings in my water supply, power, data cables, etc. and carries out my sewage. So the road becomes this conduit which networks the entire city. But today the municipality comes and lays the road. We have multiple agencies waiting in the background. They seem to wait until the road is laid by the municipality, then come and dig it up, one by one by one. So you're back to square one. That road nobody would believe was done 6 months ago. Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. Tendeshwar fixes the design of the road itself, but also the design of the utility corridors. Every agency has been allocated a utility corridor with regular access chambers under the footpaths. No agency should dig the roads anymore. We started with saying no more of build poorly, cut repeatedly, rebuild poorly. Instead, let's aim for cut once and fix once and for all.
Tendeshwar seemed to me a very good thing because for the first time we were looking at urban roads with much higher and better specifications which would be more sustainable.
This is change that people can see. It dramatically improves their quality of life. It improves the walkability, revitalizes their neighborhoods, improves safety and security. It just improves the experience of the streets.
I believe that urban India, at least as far as the roads and cities are concerned, should be a completely different picture if Tendeshwar specifications and Tendeshwar model becomes the basis for road making. I think it's a big leap forward.
Why such wide footpaths? Why has the road surface reduced? Well, it's like Bernoulli's principle. If you put plenty of water in a wide funnel, it will still drip slowly at the pinched end of the funnel. So also, if you let in 100 cars at the widest part of the road, but only 10 can go at the narrowest, we have not eased traffic. We've simply created a traffic jam. Our city roads are filled with such traffic jams. What we have done in Tendershore is designed for the narrowest part of the road and given the rest for parking, bus space. It has dramatically improved the flow of traffic. And in spite of zero land acquisition, we have protected all the old trees in this project. We have provided space to accommodate the same number of street hawkers.
I'm working as a project coordinator in this project. This project is first of its kind project in India, so which has really inspired us, and we have learned a lot of things from this project.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Sobhya. Hope that was in some way fruitful to the attendees here.
No, it was great. Thanks so much, Shashank. And I think I've also seen it. I think when the first St. Mark's Road came up, and there was a lot of opposition, and people like, why are you taking away road space, etc., etc. And now, suddenly, when the network is emerging, I think people are also understanding and realizing the importance of these roads. So I think it's great. I think for all of us, it's a huge, especially people in Bangalore who are getting to experience it. I think it's great. So thank you, Shashank. I'll move on to the next session. I know there are people putting in questions in the chat. Please feel free to put your questions there, but we'll take them at the end after the second presentation is done. We'll take the questions together. Devanil, I welcome Studio Plot, who Devanil right now will be presenting to us.
Yeah. Hi, Sobhya. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I know it's a tough act to follow after the amazing presentation by Jana. So do let me know once you can see my screen.
Yeah. Shashank, I think you'll have to stop sharing and see if...
Oh, so, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Is it visible?
It's just coming on. Yes, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'll try to keep it a little quick. So it's almost like 7. I know everyone has to get back and everything. So with Studio Pod, we are a Mumbai-based urban design studio, and we do a lot of different kind of urban design projects, urban planning. We also from time to time get involved with participatory planning and also any kind of engagement that allows us to kind of inform people about the state of urban planning and the right that they have as citizens in different ways. So I'll just start off with a small diagram which is kind of inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is what the existing scenario is, where the pedestrian or the cyclist is usually at the bottom of the pyramid, and the most important place or the pinnacle is basically given to the vehicular movement. Our aim always is to inverse the pyramid. So what could be if we are able to achieve that, where let's say the citizens or the people of the city get the preference and the first important part of the entire pyramid system over here. So keeping that in mind, we always like to go back to these two images which speak a lot to us. So this is Chandni Chowk from 1841. That's 1841. That's quite important to notice. And what's interesting in this photograph is the amount of space that the streets have over there for the concept of Hathi, Ghoda and Palki. So as you can see, the same street is being used by the people, the Hathis and the Ghodas, and the equivalent of that, let's say in our modern times, would be a Hathi could be like a rail-based public transport system, a Ghoda could be an intermediate motorized transportation, and obviously the people are the non-motorized transportation. So this is something which we had as part of our history, for that matter. Similarly, this is an example of another street, another photograph, which is from Gwalior. This is 1870. And as you can see, the same thing exists over here, where in green is actually highlighted a separate part of the road, which was dedicated for the movement of animals, for the movement of goods. And then you obviously had the yellow part of the road, which is mostly for the movement of people and other vehicles. And it's very similar to the context that we have in our cities right now, where usually a lot of retail and commercial activities happen along our streets with residential activities and residential land use on top of it. So taking inspiration from here and our urge to reverse the pyramid or inverse the pyramid, as I said, what we thought we are going to do today is we're just going to kind of talk about our approach. Rather than talking very specifically about projects, we'll talk about some of the approaches that we have taken in different projects that we've been engaged with, we've been working on for some time now. So the first approach that I'd like to speak about is basically using streets as a citywide open space system. And this one is essentially a map for 2025 Gurgaon. And you can see the different modes of transportation have been indicated on this particular map. I'll not get into the details of it, but when you have such a comprehensive plan, what it also gives us the opportunity is to create these particular movement routes as connectors and also as open spaces, continuous open space networks. So over here are three ROWs, right of ways, that we have sort of indicated over here. And in different capacities, they are used. They are used by different modes of transport, as you can see. The bottom one being for the elevated metro corridor. Irrespective of the mode of transport, you can see that an attempt has been made to create a continuous green corridor in all the three sections. And that is one of the first things that has been a key ingredient of the approach that we take here at Studio Pod. I'm also joined by my colleague Sahil, who's going to talk about this particular aspect over here. Sahil, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Is my voice audible?
Yes, Sahil, you're audible.
Yeah. So this is a particular project in Thane station area, which we are still working on with the corporation part of the smart city. So talking of the reclaimed public spaces, this is one of the important aspects where the station area outside Thane is sort of a very much a better representation of a multimodal hub where you have auto rickshaws, bus stands, everything is laid on top of each other. But however, there is a lot of chaos that is happening once you get out of the station. And one of the important aspect was identifying the walking network, like the pattern of pedestrian movement, at the same time the vehicle pattern. And we sort of identified certain intersections that were conflict zones, and of course the walking footpath widths that were there. And we tried some design exercises over there. And if we go to the next slide, yeah. So this is where we tried to achieve as much as walkable space as possible for the pedestrians once they get out of the station, at the same time trying to do the geometry correction of the ROWs. And create a seamless flow of the movement of these vehicles. Like you can see, the red demarcated flow is the kind of 8 loop pattern that we have tried to create, which creates like a conveyor belt system within the station area, and all your IPT stands, may it be for shared auto systems or metered auto systems, all of them are placed around this entire loop. And while doing so, we were able to achieve a lot of walking space in this area. And the other important aspect while doing this was talking about the subsurface or the utilities which were below. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the existing situation, the kind of chaos that it had. And in the middle is the kind of situation that we envisaged for. And while doing so, by identifying all the infrastructure that is running below this entire system, we kind of developed, worked with the corporation, developed a trench system, got all those utilities trenched inside that corridor. And what we achieved was this particular walking area, which is still under construction right now. So this is where we'll be getting our surface finished material that would be coming up on top. But at the moment, it is PCC. So yeah, that is the achievement that we have got in terms of the reclaiming public spaces, for that matter. Yeah, Devanand.
The panel will have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry for that. This is actually something which we also explored, which is the idea of creating loops. And this comes very close to what Sobhya was just talking about at the beginning, the conservancy lanes that are there in Malleswaram. So this is Worli. It's a pretty famous area in Mumbai. What you can see over here is also the sea link which connects Worli to the area of Bandra in Mumbai. What this particular approach gave us was that we always had these set system of parks over here in Worli, which are highlighted in green. Only once we looked at it very closely, we realized that there is actually a possibility of linking these parks and creating a loop around it, an eco loop basically, which would be focused on people walking, focused on people cycling. And this is what led us to also acknowledge certain hidden links, which are highlighted in red right now. So these are sort of equivalent to the conservancy lanes that Sobhya was talking about. These are thoroughfare routes which are used by pedestrians, but only residents of Worli actually know about it. These are things which the average Mumbaiker will actually not know about. So this became our opportunity to create this integrated loop system, which would allow pedestrians to go from Annie Besant Road over here all the way to the Worli Promenade, which is along the Arabian Sea. And of course, we did that by looking at certain pause points or certain nodes that could be important for people along these loop systems that we're talking about. So one of the first things that we do, like it's very important to have these kind of projects also to make it visible. And the first thing to visibility is that you should, we always try to approach and borrow elements from design which is already present in the ecosystem of the space. So here are certain historical references or historical buildings which are a part of the Worli cityscape. We got inspired from them, and then we derived certain motifs from there, which were used extensively throughout our designs. Like, for example, the Rangoli pattern, which is used almost in front of every household in Maharashtra, was also something which we got inspired by. And then it translates into kind of making these connectors more usable for the pedestrians. So we, got inspired by the Worli Fort pinnacle that I was talking to you about. And then there are certain elements like simple elements like including a QR code, which probably gives you information about Worli as a precinct, as a part of the city, its history. And all you have to do is have a smartphone or a device which allows you to scan the barcode, and you are privy to all these interesting information and tidbits about Worli. So similarly, there was another node where we actually tried reclaiming a lot of public space This is done by actually road dieting and making sure that something which was, I think, around 1,000 square meters of public space becomes almost 2,900 square meters of public space. And this is something which also ties in with our idea of reclaiming public space that I've already presented before. Another approach is always also looking out for opportunities in the kind of proposals that we get for designing. So here, for example, this is the famous Dal Lake of Srinagar. What you see in purple over here are actually two-way lanes, vehicular lanes, and then what you see in red are four-lane roads of along the waterfront of the Dal Lake. The proposal over here initially was about making the purple roads also into four-lane roads so that it becomes a continuous four-lane road all along the waterfront of, I think it's around a 24-kilometer waterfront of the Dal Lake. What we looked at it as an opportunity was to give the city a really good waterfront. So what I've highlighted over here in purple, like, because the idea over here was that if the enemy is going ahead with the idea of four laning, if I were to call it that, of the road, what I've highlighted over here in blue is actually integrating a mass transit system like a tramway. What we've also tried to do is that Dal also had the culture of water transport. It is lost right now. It is something which is mostly used by tourists, but integrating that as part of your multimodal transport sort of approach to this particular vision plan also helped us give access to people to the water. And similarly, a system of boardwalks that we created, integrated pedestrian movement, bringing them closer to the beauty of Dal, which is all because of the lake that is over here. On the other side, the system of boardwalk gives you access to the biodiversity zone. So the idea over here is that we have to take every opportunity that we get to not only look at movement for vehicles, but also to understand that it is an opportunity to move people and give them lost land. And similarly, this project then kind of, developed further. And there were a lot of lost linkages, which used to allow the people to directly take their shikaras, the boats, all the way to, let's say, the Mughal gardens of Shalimar Bagh. This is the sort of the present condition on your left of that particular canal, which used to connect the Mughal garden to the Dal Lake. And what we've done is we've tried to propose something which actually makes that lost linkage revived. Similarly, with the revival of water transport, near Hazrat Bal, which is a famous shrine in Srinagar, there's an existing bus stop. The idea over here is to integrate it with a ferry terminal or something like a shikara terminal, which basically becomes an integrated mode of transport for the city of Srinagar. So, like I said, every opportunity has to be made use of. This is again something which came to us. This is for the city of Pune, and I have my colleague Satish over here who's going to be talking a bit about this.
Good evening, everyone. Satish, I'm an urban designer working at Studio Pod. So the context of this project was to sort of work way around the metro station that was proposed to create public space. And the approach that we took here was to sort of rethink the entire street stretch and the alignment of it, rather than being an approach where you have a center line and then you just sort of develop the street from that. We went for an off-centered approach where the entire ROW was shifted towards the southern side to create more space for the public along the space where the metro station is. So this was how. This is how the space is right now, and we have these 4 pockets of open spaces on either side of the metro station, which could be potentially tapped into to expand the public realm, for that matter. So the approach that we took was to completely take the space on the southern side to shift the ROW downwards, so that we could get more space towards the northern side and have a contiguous open space that could be directly integrated with the metro station. And hence providing better access, a grand entry to the station, and also better connectivity with the surrounding neighborhood. And also, as you can see, there is a junction right next to it. and how the whole system can tie down together and act as a grand gesture rather than being just an approach to rather mundane infrastructure in the middle of the scheme.
Right. So yeah, this is another project. I think my friend Sahil is going to talk a bit more about it. But just to give you an introduction, this is the Maulana Shaukat Ali Road in Mumbai. This was a part of a competition which was floated for designing 6 streets in Mumbai, 6 stretches of streets in Mumbai rather. And what you see at the bottom of the screen is actually the kind of insecurity that a lot of our women colleagues felt when they were on the site, actually documenting it for the competition. And like they had some really horrible experiences. And that kind of led us to build, kind of design the street from the perspective of safety for the women over here. So basically, the concept of making a street which works for everyone. So I think Sahil, if you could explain a little bit more about this.
Yeah, sure. So I think that was one of the important narration that we took forward the entire, and primarily it was designing a street for all, which is safe.
Vanilla, I'll just mute you because there's a disturbance.
Yeah. So yeah, taking forward that particular approach, what we did was that it was based on 2 major parameters. One was the walkable meter, and the other one was the safety meter. We kind of had different parameters identifying that how walkable and how safe that street is, and identifying those elements and how can we deal with that particular element as a cross section of the street and also as the arrangement of different functions along that street. If we go to the next slide, yeah. So this was the existing situation where primarily there were 3 different conditions, where on the first one, you already had existing shops which were aligned to the carriageway with their backside towards the carriageway. The second scheme was where you have a lot of industrial area with the trucks which were loading and unloading. So, and the third case was a streetscape where there were a lot of vendors who were occupying the carriageway. Now, taking into consideration these 3 main cross sections, what we decided was that if we are widening that street and keep making it safe, we also need to incorporate all these existing elements. So for instance, the first aspect was if the existing shops are to be incorporated instead of having them on the edge of the footpath, if we widen the footpath and have it right in the middle, you have like a double face retail and 2-way system in terms of walking. And there's a shift of those stalls in 2 sides. The second part was quite critical, where keeping the industrial land use as is, and also the loading unloading program of the vehicles as is. What if we move the entire pedestrian realm right in the center of the median, and keep that as a walking experience? And the third aspect where we explored was that over the period of time when these plots are being redeveloped, they would be having future setbacks. So already taking into consideration those setbacks and how incremental this footpath expansion can be as an overall stretch. Also as a context, this entire stretch was lying between one upcoming metro station and already existing Grant Road station. So walkability was one very important aspect in connecting these transit hubs as well. If you go to the next slide, is where while we are doing this shifting of the pedestrian walkway from the sideways to the center, there were certain parks, especially there was one park which was only women's park, and there was one children's park. So all these parks were having access in these by lanes. So that was one of the approach where what if we open up the compound walls and make that park visible, and that entire cross section of that street opens up into that park, and you have that entire park having its activities spilled over onto that street as one of the important aspects while doing this. So yeah, like along with designing for women, it was also for elderly people, for the kids. At the same time, when we are talking of designing streets for all, also taking into consideration the vehicles, the trucks which need to be loaded, unloaded at the same time. Yeah, Devanil.
Vanel, you'll have to unmute again.
The final aspect that I actually wanted to talk to you all about was flexibility and adaptability. So this in front of you is actually one of the most iconic streets in the entire country. This is the Baratanda Road, which is in the town of Puri in Odisha. And what you see right now becomes a place for a crowd of a huge amount of crowd, basically annually for the Jagannath festival. So the whole approach that we took over here was for kind of designing the space with adaptable and flexible units.
So the entire approach of this particular project was to keep the street usable and pedestrian friendly throughout the year by introducing modules that are movable, and these will have aspects of green, sharing devices, and all the other facilities that the pilgrims would require on a daily basis to make their visit to the temple comfortable. But the challenge was that nothing could be fixed because you have annually these 3 massive chariots that are making a trip of 1 kilometer from Jagannath temple to Gundicha temple, and it has to be a smooth surface. So that was the challenge that we had to overcome with not fixing anything on the ground and still providing a very comfortable public realm for the pilgrims. And the red dots that you see are these multiple pots which would actually align around the parikrama area around the temple whenever there is the and this was the visualization where we came up with a lot of greenery and that are movable anchors actually to make the space much more greener and well shaded to protect the pilgrims from the harsh weather of Odisha. And that's another visualization that you could see. And this was a competition entry. And the way this would proceed, even though we were not doing this anymore, would be of the similar lines because of the unique nature of the site. And finally, after talking about all these ideas that we threw, when things get real, it really starts getting exciting. And particularly for a project that we're working right now, which is a public realm development, but is privately funded. And when this happens, there are multiple challenges on ground, starting from coordination between the different municipal bodies and the allied departments, because we are not approaching through the government. So it has to be done individually with all of these ULBs, and that becomes extremely complex. But also, while doing that, we want to establish a pedestrian-friendly street at the heart of Mumbai, and reclaiming the space between high volume traffic and the existing infrastructure on ground, which may or may not be malleable. So the challenges brought this Senapati Bapat Marg in the city of Mumbai. We have challenges of haphazard traffic movement, unsafe pedestrian crossings and pedestrian movement. And on top of all, there are multiple services, including SWD and electrical and communication lines, which may or may not be able to move into a trench or be changed or sort of be amended for that matter. And again, in the context of India, we do have a lot of encroachments along the footpaths. There are a lot of unauthorized street parking, and even though the carriageway is almost 12 meters wide, the usable space ends up being 1.5 lanes or 4.5 meters, which in itself is counterproductive. So, sort of mapping the whole issue along the entire stretch of the SP Marg area, we figured out that each of these particular problems have to be addressed in a different way and through different departments altogether. So we had to get the traffic police on board, the private bus owners who are parking their buses illegally there, they have to be moved to some other places. MCGM, of course, have to be contacted for the coordination of the whole thing. And on top of that, we had services of SWD and also best lines, electrical lines running around. So it was an exercise of coordination and bringing everyone up to speed for a very long time before we could even hit the ground. And the picture that you see is very interesting because when we started work on ground, MCGM decided that they have to expand their SWD lines, and literally they just started putting their trenches and the hume pipes and their chambers. on ground, and they improvised on ground because they did not have a drawing to work with. So it was literally them digging up the site, figuring out the levels, and then putting the lines wherever it works to drain the water. And this really had to be accommodated into our design in several ways. And we also had there is a flyover in the middle of the street as well. And under the flyover are multiple MCGM and BMC structures, and they have to be relocated and given better infrastructure, which was the give and take. So we take out the space for pedestrian while relocating them to a better space and giving them better infrastructure. So we were going for a win-win situation over there. And the carriageway itself was really challenging because it had multiple surfaces, including asphalt and M40 concrete, whereas the M40 was the sacred element that could not be touched. So we had to, even if we are going for a civil work or expanding the pedestrian realm, we'll have to overcome these challenges and figure out a way and technique to still do it permanently. And of course, managing traffic on ground was the most important challenge that we had on hand, and also managing the parking on the street sides, and how can this be streamlined was the main challenge that we had in mind. And surprisingly, MCGM also decided to do some development along the under the flyover through these green walls, and it was good. It was a refreshing feel. So we decided to incorporate into our design in the later stages and sort of evolve it to revolve around these interventions. So it was a lot of back and forth that was happening. And the way after all of these exercises and after looking at all of these challenges, we went ahead with the approach where the priority was to reclaim space for pedestrians, effectively increasing around 3,700 square meters of public realm throughout the stretch, which is uninterrupted. And as a secondary layer, there is a continuous cycle track that would allow cyclists to seamlessly pass through the entire stretch. And finally, a streamlined corridor for the vehicle movement, which would alleviate the congestion in the area. And apart from these, we also reclaimed the space under the flyover, around 3,000 square meters again, which would be given back to the community after development. So how did it work when we went on ground? So the first thing that we wanted to test out was reclaiming the space, and it was a lot of back and forth, literally placing the barricades here and like 1 meter or half a meter apart, and slowly pushing it towards the carriageway. And finally, what we could achieve was this: like on a Monday morning, peak hours, all the traffic is streamlined, and we see a kid playing on the other side of the reclaimed space, unsupervised, and it is still a very safe space for pedestrians. And we cannot wait to see this as a permanent intervention in the heart of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was an amazing presentation. It was great to understand, and I love the way that you all put it in terms of what were the design principles that you follow. There was core to, even starting design, and I think that's great because it's good to see where to start with, right? What do we sort of formulate as principles, especially when we get into public space design? So I think that was really great. I'll move into, I know we are already 5 minutes out of time, but I request if we can extend 10 more minutes and take a few questions. We've got a couple of questions that have come up on the chat. For the rest of you guys who want to ask questions, please, there's a raise hand option at the bottom. You can raise your hand and I can sort of just ask you guys to ask the question yourselves. Kaushik, are you there? Dhaval, I will leave out your question because I know that can be typed out and Shushan can type it down later. That would be great. Kaushik, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Okay. So, in terms of the alerts, I felt it to be really interesting. But in terms of people moving into ramps or exiting from the ramps, how has been the experience of the physically challenged, and how have they been able to make use of the pedestrian pathways? I love to understand more about that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really interesting question that you asked there. So that is something that we've actively looked into in terms of making sure that the roads are accessible and to all types of users, regardless of if you have any disabilities, anything like that. We want to make sure that the road is not inhibiting and not intimidating for you. So what actually we've done, if I can go into the specifics, is basically the first bollard is always located 1,000 mm, which is the 1 meter away from the compound wall, which gives enough space for a wheelchair user to use that. And then subsequent bollards are located 750 mm away. So that is what we've done. But one of the challenges that we are currently facing with that, and that's why we are still in the process of rethinking and the process of refining it. One of the challenges that we face is that 1,000 mm is just unfortunately the right width for a two-wheeler to pass through as well. So you end up having two-wheelers mounting, and that's also why we've placed them as far away from the travel lane as possible, right on the compound edge. But two-wheelers do use that, so we are now exploring possible ways of maybe putting a chain link fence just for the last one, but that adds a bit of discomfort to say a wheelchair user, because they have to go and unclick chain link fences every time. So it is a tough problem to solve.
Awesome. I'm happy we are actively thinking about it and solving it.
Definitely.
Next question. I mean, we could sort of extend this to Studio Pod as well. I mean, is there something that you guys are looking at when you get into this sort of design, where you look at the physically challenged? And I would like to put in even the blind into this, dialogue of when we say universally accessible. We are doing these designs. So, I mean, Studio Pod also, please feel free to, see how you guys are thinking of it.
Right. So I think because you specifically mentioned the blind as well, one of the things we definitely try doing incorporating in our design is tactile paving, something which kind of allows them to have a sense of the space. And also bollards. I mean, as Shashank mentioned, that's actually a challenge even we face, because the minimum distance between a bollard, it's the same for the two-wheeler as well as a wheelchair, right? But I think in our experience, one of the key challenges, apart from just the bollard, is the fact that our pavements in a lot of places are irregular in terms of height as well. So just to allow someone to get access to the pedestrian realm is the first challenge itself, and that we have to overcome. And that's what we try to do in most of the designs that we are working on currently. I think Sahil and Satish are also extensively working on streetscape projects with us right now. If you guys want to add on anything to that.
Yeah, David. So I think, like we mentioned, the height of the footpath is something that is very important from our end, because it just keeps on varying in the city. It's right from 100 to 300, also to 500 also. That is something, keeping it consistent throughout is a very important aspect, and also a challenge for that matter, because of if you're not touching any utilities, and even for that matter, when you have existing trees who have these roots that are going all over the place, you face all these challenges in that sense. And the other aspect is the aspect of curb cuts, especially at the property entrances, where we always face this issue to get the society people on board and making them understand that having this curb cut is actually useful for them, at the same time for the pedestrians. Because at the first instance for them, it's like you're just putting a curb in front of my house and narrowing down my property entrance, which is not the case, because you're just creating a bulb out and letting the cars move inside. So these are small aspects that always on site you have to get them on board and explain them as a challenge. Yeah.
I think that moves very well into what Amrita has also asked. And Amrita, I'm going to take the liberty of asking your question, because it sort of moves into this. saying that when you're looking at, according to the neighborhood, right, and that one size fits all, I think, Shashank, if you can also touch on it and how this negotiation actually has happened when you look at the Tendershore roads. Though you may have certain logic and principles, but actually adapting it to different contexts in Bangalore or any other city where this does change. And I mean, curb cut, as Sahil is mentioning, is I'm sure one real important point of negotiation where you have to face the residents that are living there.
Yeah, that is actually, we face that as well, because we have standards as to what the vehicle entry sizes are, and everyone wants it to be slightly bigger. They want, okay, no, we want a little bit more here. I really don't know what you're going to get from that, sort of 1 mm, 2 mm that we push around. But yeah, that is, I mean, the thing is, one thing that we really need to make sure is that we standardize these things, because once we standardize them, we can ensure quality. If we do not standardize them, then what ends up happening is each time it has to be cast on site. And if you're going to cast it on site every single time for every single property, that weakens the structure, the substructure, all of it. So we need to have these standards in place, and that is, these standards have been worked out and arrived at after testing across multiple ranges. So it's not just that, okay, we are saying 4.5 meters because that's what fit my Alto or something like that. No, 4.5 meters for an entry exit is more than enough for anyone to sort of park their cars or drive into their driveway. So these are things that are definitely, as Sahil was mentioning, these are negotiations that we always have to have with property owners. Sometimes you come up with commercial enterprises that have different set of guidelines for, different set of requirements. Like once, I think there was a stretch in front of the Mercedes showroom here on MG Road that we had to negotiate with them and tell them that, no, listen, what we are giving you, see, because what we can do when we don't provide, when we do not extend your ramp, is that we can provide a landscape strip all around that space, which allows a bit more beautification and B, a bit of sink in the road. So so yeah, I mean, it's these kind of things. To that extent, we would not recommend flexibility and what is that? I think you worded it very well, Amrita. I'm searching for your, but basically, the adaptability of that module should not change. But then on the whole, when you look at the network, when you look at the way that the ROW is divided, that does change and that does respond to individual neighborhoods, because it cannot be the same on, say, an MG road, and if I'm hoping you're from Bangalore, it cannot be the same on an MG road and say some inside road of Indranagar. It does need to vary, and that is something that we inherently, before going into it, we study, we look at how people are using the space, how people are moving through the space. Do we need, or can we close off perhaps a couple of intersections so that we make it a better and easier, or rather open up a few extra intersections to allow pedestrian movement to be easier across the road. So yeah, it does keep changing.
Moving on to Meghna's question. Meghna, do you want to just unmute and ask? Is Meghna around? I'll move to Ruchika. Ruchika, are you here?
Yeah, hello. Hi, Shashank sir.
Hi.
So I would like to ask about the Tendershore roads. So socially and how they're long-lasting and comfortable, but do they also act as a sponge to the water which falls on the space in the road?
That's a really interesting question. So that's something that we, right in the beginning of when we started off with Tendershore and the whole model for Bangalore, is something that we actively experimented with and tried to solve. So one thing that we do is, as I was telling you about these landscape strips, they have this kind of a drip system where we have these pipes that go down into the into the ground, so it dissipates some of the water. But more than that, the main thing comes from in our stormwater chambers. Every single stormwater chamber has a network of these pipes that allow water to percolate into the ground.
There are rainwater pits which have been calculated for the capacity of the rainwater that the space should take.
Yes, that's right. So they basically each of these pipes have all your various levels of filters inside them, and then so we can't do it all along the stretch, but basically you have stormwater chambers every 15 meters anyway. Sorry, every 30 meters, anyway, you have stormwater chambers. So when the water eventually does collect, we allow that to percolate, and we've also staggered our stormwater chamber, like the entry point and the exit point for the water. So that allows the water to hold for a little bit of time before it moves on. So that again further allows percolation into the.
So this tendershare, when it is being actually done by other agencies, are they allowed to sort of change or work around with that?
Yeah, so tendershare basically it's a set of guidelines, right? They can adapt it to whatever extent they want. In fact, in some cases, when the government or the BBMP or whoever is building it does not have the money to put it, we ensure that they at least get tendershare light, which is basically without the utilities in place. So at least you're solving the problem of on-ground walkability and on-ground sort of usability of the road. And then hopefully they can, since we use the loose fixed pavers and all that, hopefully later on it can be adapted such that it becomes complete streets.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the last question, but Dhaval, I'm going to ask you to keep it quick, and then I will pass it on to Suchitra to wrap up the session. Dhaval, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, thanks, Sobhya. So 2 questions, depending on time, people can see which one they want to take up or both. So one was, can we get some details on how tendershare streets allow access to utilities without digging? And the second one was, since it came up, there was reference to, issues for, say, visually challenged folks. So are tendershare streets looking at integrating more technology to help, maybe give some sort of cues or those sort of things to visually challenged folks? Thanks.
Oh yeah, definitely. So the whole kind of designing for the visually impaired and the visually challenged is a challenge in a way. So one thing that we are looking at right now is obviously your tactile pavers, but we're also looking at moving away from the regular tactile pavers, which cause a bit of slippage because they are because the texture of the paver doesn't allow for, like, for example, if you have heels, if you have like smooth sole shoes, it can become slippery, especially when it rains. So what we are now looking at is your metal studs, which you might see them in the airports and all of that. So it is a bit of a upgrade in terms of the costs involved, but we honestly think it's worth it, and we honestly think we've now proved how tendershare works. So we can add on to that, and so that's as far as the visually impaired is concerned. Yeah.
Shashank, I also had a question actually. So we were just talking about standardization, and in a lot of ways, a standard term that we use right now is the term world class. So when you're designing your streets, then you also sometimes get burdened by that term, like.
I think we need to move away from the terminology of world class and even make it Indian class. And Indian class needs to become, because see, the thing is, with our streets especially, there's so much more going on than any of your world class streets. It's not the same. They're two are very different kind of very different games altogether. You cannot take something from, and I mean, some of these ideas may have been, originally originated from thoughts from the way that things are designed in the West, but that doesn't mean that we can't adapt it to, the Indian context, and that is something that, we are constantly aware of and constantly know that we, might be falling short of delivering that Indian class that we hope to. So, but yeah, that's, as I said, a learning experience all the way.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Suchitra, do you mind unmuting and wrapping up our session? Suchitra is from Malleswaram Social. So she's an architect as well. And basically the brainchild of, this is her brainchild. I would put it that way. Anchored a lot of the work in Malleswaram. Suchitra, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sobhya. Wonderful session, continuing our wonderful sessions from yesterday. And I think a couple of things that seem to sort of come to my mind is that most of it, a lot of this solutioning itself goes to is based on how we observe. Because I saw the kind of solutions that, whether it was Jana or whether it was Studio Pod, you're observing the situation with very different eyes, because we see them or see things all the time. We are surrounded by these situations, but solutions can only emerge when you observe them in a particular way and really with that gaze. And again, to demonstrate, I think Jana USP has been able to push its way through, thank God, and demonstrate that when the streets come back to people, the city becomes a better place. And very often this is also required to be done, or because most people can't visualize a different reality. Most people do believe that having streets, cities which are good for cars are the best cities, American cities, I'd say don't go further than even Europe. Please stay there if you want to look west, because American cities are the worst inspirations for India, for sure. Thirdly, I think what you said, about Indian solutions, Shashank, very true. We just really need to look at solutions which work for us. Why should we look anywhere else? And then you start getting these unique solutions. So even Studio Pod, when you showed Chandni Chowk, Chandni Chowk has been redone, thank God. Let's see how it works from now onwards. But also the fact that when you look at the lowest common denominator, poor people who walk a lot, or who are the largest set of people who occupy our cities, actually, not the richer people, not even middle class people, but the poor people, and who have to actually walk, women who are the most disadvantaged in sense of how they use a public space. So when you design for them, you're making things better for everybody, actually. So I think these are things that really need to be brought in the public realm more and more in a very forceful way. By the kind of projects you do, you're really making that possible. But it would be great if it doesn't stay within the small sort of there's a lot of navel gazing within the community. We keep sharing our projects with each other and hoping for appreciation from each other. But that's really of no use. What you really need to do is to get out and just make sure that people in the municipalities, in the administration, the political class, and biggest of all, the residents and the citizens of our cities actually understand that how much better their lives could be if these kind of solutions could be implemented. So thank you so much. It's been a great experience listening to you guys, and more power to you, I would say. And I hope that things do change across our cities with your kind of work spreading more and more. So thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you guys. Please attend tomorrow's session. We have yet another exciting session. I'm sure the first all three of them have been amazing. So looking forward to meeting everyone there. See you guys. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you.